It seems to me, in listening to all of this and following what I've been following over the years in regard to this issue, that we have, as much as anything, a public confidence problem, a significant public confidence problem, which, of course, impacts the willingness of investors to be involved significantly. Do you all have any ideas about how the industry can assist in building public confidence? The storage issue, of course, or disposal issue is I'm sure one that has to be addressed in particular in that regard. But could you give me some ideas about what could be done to bring the public into a position where they feel more confident about moving forward with nuclear energy?
Mr. Vice Chairman, I'll voluntarily respond to that. The industry admits that we do not do a good job and we are not boastful. And that comes to our detriment when you look at public confidence. I think in the investor community, and Mr. Asselstein, correct me if I'm wrong, those who explore it, I think, come with yield a more positive view. Through the Nuclear Energy Institute, we do conduct surveys, and for those surveyed around the plants themselves, we have a very high support rate for nuclear power. What we do see, however, when we survey the more broader population is that there is a misunderstanding, in particular in the environmental area. And most people do not equate nuclear power with being carbon-free with respect to greenhouse gas and emissions. So we have taken that on as one of the issues that we do need to do. Also, there are a number of other organizations. One of our more successful one is the Young Generation Nuclear Group, which is some of the new students coming out of the universities working into the industry to help communicate that. I'd also say that in addition to the industry, the NRC has integrated public interaction very much into the licensing process. And even before any of the applications were submitted, the NRC by process would conduct a number of town meetings so as to educate people about that. So that's an opportunity at that point also for the industry to share the safety record, to share the process going forward. But so I do acknowledge that the advertising, the self-promotion is probably something that as an industry we have not made a priority, but need to going forward.
Maybe Mr. Asselstein and possibly Dr. Cochran too on this, if you don't mind, if you have any ideas.
Yeah. First, I would say from the perspective of somebody in the financial community, I think the industry has actually done a fairly effective job over the past couple of years in beginning to lay the groundwork to build support for new plant commitments. And obviously this process is going to be ongoing over the next several years. I mean, I start with the performance of the existing plants. That has been consistently strong over the past decade, and that was a very important foundation because without that, then the prospect of new commitments just wouldn't happen. So continued strong performance of the existing plants from a safety standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, and economically is a critical initial ingredient. But what the industry has done fairly effectively, I think, over the past couple of years is begin to talk about the potential cost of a new nuclear plant, the approach that they will use in making a decision of whether to go forward or not, in order to really educate the financial community and investors about how that process will unfold well in advance of when they come to investors and say, now we want to borrow several billions of dollars to build this plant. I think they need to continue to follow that approach going forward.
Well, in my view, the best way to get public support is to be truthful and transparent about all the risks and benefits of the technology. In looking at the industry's potential public relations problems going forward, a concern I would have is that if you look at the safety of plants, nuclear plants in the United States are safer today than they were 2 decades ago. But if you going forward, most of the plants, new plants that are going to be introduced in the world are going into countries that do not have good safety cultures. And when one of these plants runs into a problem, as it has in the past, the good plants will suffer along with the bad ones. And so I think some attention needs to be given by the United States government to the development of an improved safety culture in other countries that are getting into this business. It's the safety culture at the plant that is the most significant, the most important factor that affects the overall safety. It's the culture at the plant. And we've improved the culture at U.S. plants, but we have not addressed that problem on a global basis going forward.
Wait, Mr. Five, you have something quickly to add?
One thing that might be worth looking into is the legislative and regulatory structure we have for managing spent fuel. Mr. Ellers is exactly right, it seems to me, in saying the structure we have requires you to prove that this stuff's going to be safe for 1 million years. I chaired the committee for the National Academies that came up with that brilliant suggestion, and it's really hard to do. And it's very hard to convince the public that you can do it. And so it might not be a bad idea to take another look at that structure and see if there's a more sensible way to approach it.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler.